binary code coming into human minds in dreams or from touching symbols on alien machines, like what happened in Rendlesham Forest on December 26, 1980, was apparently of great interest to America's Defense Intelligence Agency. The DIA had remote viewers working at Fort Meade, Maryland, next door to the National Security Agency in 1986. Remote viewer Lynn Buchanan worked in a DIA unit called DTS. Their goal was to research how accurately psychic abilities could be used in their spy program called Stargate. On July 14, 1986, one of Lynn's assigned practice targets was the Rendlesham Forest incident. But only his monitor knew the target on a 3x5 card in a file drawer. Further, Lynn knew nothing about the military mystery that had occurred 6 years before on December 26 to 28, 1980. He knew nothing, zero, never heard of it. But what Lynn did see in remote viewing seems to link to the repeating theme in the binary code messages about planetary survival for aliens, for humans, or for both. I interviewed Lynn Buchanan recently about this 2008 CIA released document. This came out on the web officially at the CIA site. It is Lynn's original 1986 Rendlesham Forest controlled remote viewing session. And when I called him and said, Lynn, have you seen what the CIA released? He said, what? They were never supposed to let the public know anything about what we were remote viewing. Well, none of us, including Lynn, knew that this had been unclassified and posted on the CIA website until John Burroughs got an anonymous call to go to this specific URL. None of us would have known if somebody who did know called John Burroughs and he called me. And then I called Lynn Buchanan. It is the CIA website, and there was this 1986 transcript of Lynn Buchanan's remote viewing session. Why it was put there, Lynn wondered, without anyone telling him. The following audio segment from my interview with Lynn about the 1986 session begins as he was seeing inside a craft landed in Rendlesham Forest, and he's trying to find the pilot and the propulsion unit in remote viewing.
I got that the driver of this vehicle is not in the vehicle. He's somewhere else.
Like this object that you are remote viewing in Rendlesham Forest could be a drone that is not manned, but that the intelligence associated with this is somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's when I got AOL break. Oh, I'm viewing ATs. So move me back to the place with the yellow light. That's when I got an incubator. I definitely realized that this young person, whatever, was in the place with the yellow light and that it was an incubator. Putting my analyst hat on, I would tend to say from this one session that this craft was looking for an ideal place, and once it found it, that incubator would open up and provide a living space for whatever was in it.
And you mean that the incubator in the black glassy craft, which is the outside version we have from the Pennison drawing, it would then deposit the extraterrestrial life forms in the incubator in a site on this planet to grow into whatever those extraterrestrials are.
That would be the analysis of that one session, yes.
Now, you did other remote views on RAF Bentwaters later on.
I was tasked with finding the power source. In fact, I still didn't know really what the Bentwater thing was. I got the propulsion system was a very small, enclosed thing that didn't really hook up to the craft, but was in some way providing a field of energy around the craft. and it was in an enclosed container type thing. When I was told to mentally move into the container to find out what was going on, I was not able to do that.
And this is the black box that you encountered in that very first July 14th, 1986 remote viewing. You didn't know where you were at the time, and you didn't know what it was.
That was it, yeah. And this energy type box has come up in several other things, like Sacsayhuaman that has, I think, 100-ton stones.
Sacsayhuaman is in Cusco, Peru.
Yeah, and there was a tasking about how those were moved. I've heard a lot of people say those were moved by sound and all that, but that's not what I got in my remote viewing session. I got that there was some kind of an object that emitted energy that could surround something and make it to where you could just pick it up.
Right, it would neutralize gravity.
Yeah. I had a task one time of the Utsuobune, which was an ET that landed in northern Japan. In that case, this female-looking being came out of the ship. She carried this box with her, and she never let anybody have this box. And I think the box, whatever was in the box, was what made the ship move.
And that's the Utsuobune that I mentioned in the beginning. Time machines, incubators of alien life trying to survive in planet-seeding missions, ET hybrids and clones, eons beyond us, as the MJ-12 documents say. Whistleblowers have reported that alien technologies can make their various spacecraft, androids, and other ET technologies invisible to human eyes. This naval ship fading into invisibility is an October 2015 Northrop Grumman Facebook posting. In addition to invisibility, the extraterrestrial technology is described as functioning with self-activating software that can neutralize gravity and project three-dimensional holograms as camouflage that human eyes and minds cannot detect in the Earth environment. And it's been stressed with me that the sophistication of holograms that are used by ETs on planet Earth, that they are so good, they are so superior to anything that we are doing, that you could be in a park, it's been described to me by a military guy, and a tree that you think you are sitting by. The tree could be a hologram that is uploading and downloading information about us. The alien goal, they say, is to harvest genetic material from this planet's animal and human life in order to create a large, ongoing supply of rapid, cycle-cloned, and hybridized body containers with very advanced technology that some people in the human abduction syndrome refer to as the resurrection tubes. I first learned about the cloning tube technology the first week of March 1991 when I received in the mail a large envelope that contained an audio cassette letter and several color drawings from a woman named Linda Porter. She was born in 1946 and began having dramatic experiences with non-humans by age 12 in 1958. She had decided it was important to reach me after hearing a conference presentation that I had given in California concerning eyewitness testimony about non-human intelligences interacting with our planet. She was concerned about her vulnerability as a person caught up in the human abduction syndrome, and she was frightened about the United States government's policy of hiding the alien presence. Her letter began, quote, "We abductees are caught in the middle of a series of ongoing events that will one day prove to be historically significant to the future of the Earth. Unfortunately, because of our continuing non-voluntary interaction with these beings, we have, in a sense, become victims of both sides of the phenomena." And she means as a human abductee. On the one hand, we are used by the aliens for their own purposes, whatever those purposes might be. On the other, if we speak out, we risk ridicule from the public and, in some cases, possible harassment and/or intimidation by government and military personnel. If you could look directly into these creatures' eyes, you would realize that every detail of your life, no matter how personal, how mundane, how minute, is known to them. It makes me wonder, are we some kind of Ken and Barbie dolls being played with by an emotionally immature race of beings with no sense of morality? Or are we pawns held in the grasp of a dying race that will do anything for their own survival, including the cold-blooded manipulation of another species, we humans, and the brutal mutilation of helpless animals? Unless a person has been through the trauma of an abduction, they cannot comprehend how these entities can strip the mind and the soul as easily as they can strip the clothes off a body. They scan details of a person's life with such facility that they make you feel as if you are interesting pieces of lint caught between their toes. In the blink of an eye, these beings devastate all personal freedom, all sense of privacy, and all prospects for living a normal existence. A person's life is never the same again. He or she is changed forever. Linda Porter's words speak for a lot of abductees who have interacted with gray, blonde, reptilian, insect humanoids, tall whites, and more. But some abductees think that there are friendly non-humans, that they're actually trying to help people advance to more stability that will help the non-humans to survive as well, all echoing CJ, Peniston, this abductee. They have this same underlying theme in all of them. In this 1995 Thanksgiving letter to me, Linda Porter wrote, quote, "The people who live on the earth, those who will survive the destructive changes to come, will be evolving into a new species of being. I'm not referring right now to the time travelers from Earth's future that are here also. That was something that was necessary because Earth's governments got hold of a dangerous technology that greatly altered Earth's future for the worse. And this implies something that I have just in the last 5 years heard from some military people, that they have done time traveling, and that it started in the 1970s. Seems incredible that in the 1970s our government was already time traveling. And those that were working with time travel began to realize that time travel can, I think one man said it can snarl. You can make knots if you don't know what you're doing. And if you make snarls and knots in time, the consequences for the entire Earth future become changed. Remember the mistake that was made when I told you about a while back? Some type of technology fell into the wrong hands here, and the future travelers were sent back in time to change that. And that is her explanation for why we would have time travelers from the future involved in the Earth. They're trying to unsnarl mistakes that we made. I don't know if it has been changed, at least not yet. But that was an entire sidebar to evolution that was never meant to happen, close quote. Something that the government got. Linda Porter was the first of half a dozen people in the human abduction syndrome that I've interviewed who experienced being raised and lowered in a tube of light and passing through walls that she and other abductees say feel like thousands of little feathers all over their body when they're going through walls or matter. Linda said the light tube is different from the tunnels that opened up inside of her bedroom, like this drawing. Quote, "The beam is used only to transfer people from Earth to a craft and back." The tunnel that can also open up in people's rooms is a physical created hole from one dimension to another, probably something like an Einstein-Rosen bridge. Traveling through the tunnel was what made me ill, had something to do with change in physical density of two differing dimensions, close quote. Linda told me that in 1963, when she was 17 years old, she was abducted from her Covina, California home by gray-colored beings with very large eyes. These gray beings seem to be the extraterrestrial biological entities, or EBINs, that are described in leaked government documents as friendly and concerned about Earth and human evolution. Or maybe they are the Emerthers, reference to Sergeant CJ's binary downloads. Linda Porter was shown a procedure to transfer the soul or life force from a dying man into a healthy younger clone of the man that Linda could see in one of the cloning resurrection tubes. The gray being told Linda telepathically that the same soul transfer would be done with her. The gray explained to her that she had rheumatic fever as a teenager that damaged her heart. The gray non-human said it was vital that the Linda Porter soul entity continue in the same genetic body container that she had been born with in order to accomplish an unknown alien agenda. Linda saw rise out of the top of the dead man's spine, back here, a golden yellow-orange light that elongated in the air as it moved across the room to a row of body-sized tubes lighted from top and bottom and filled with a strange purple-looking gas. Inside the tube on the far right was a clone body of the same man, but about 10 years younger. Linda Porter said there was a problem about Earth body containers, souls, other dimensions, and the altered timelines. She said, quote, "I was told that the resurrected clone man would be relocated elsewhere, maybe Australia, and would continue on with his life," close quote. Linda thought it was vital to the non-human entities that the man's soul had to continue functioning longer inside the specific same kind of container that was his older, sick body. Linda thought that part of the reason that they take tissue samples from abductees when they are very young is to have this tissue in reserve in case a new body for an abductee becomes necessary later on, to keep the same body type and the soul together for a very specific length of time that only the aliens understand what they are doing. She said, quote, "New bodies can be stored indefinitely. The containers in the sketch with the 3 people in the tubes are storage containers. The containers in both new sketches that I sent you are activation containers. They have a light in the top that must be on the person for an unknown amount of time before a body can be activated if a body has been in storage. If newly made, it does not need light. In the sketch with the 3 people in the tubes, the body on the far right was the younger one given to the dying man." She said, "I got the impression the aliens do not like to do this soul transfer very often. Actually, I got the feeling the aliens are not supposed to be doing this at all. But they seem to be backed into a corner and have no other recourse. They also seem to be trying to hide all of this soul transfer from some higher form of life, Whatever the authority is that prohibits this soul transfer also prohibits the ETs from interfering on this planet. But Linda, they are interfering. Whoever it is much higher evolved than they are and wields a great deal of power over many, many, many other realms of existence. There is much, much more to existence than we could ever begin to understand. Much of what we have been taught regarding the physical universe and the laws that govern them are wrong. The Eben doing the soul transfer from her diseased body to her new clone body in one of the lighted tubes gave Linda Porter an overview of how the cosmos is constructed from the Eben's point of view. The universe is built on sound patterns, which is why so many different worlds, dimensions can exist in the same space. Each is on a different frequency. You disrupt a world dimension to the point that you destroy the carrier wave it exists on, and you have created a hole in existence that cannot support the dimension above or below it. Each frequency, besides maintaining its own world dimension, also supports or holds in place the one above it and below it. Everything is interdependent. There are countless worlds, dimensions occupying the same space without being aware of one another because of having their own individual octaves. This octave frequency holds the world dimension in place and causes it to exist safely without interfering with or even being aware of other worlds around it. This frequency acts as a buffer zone to keep everything in its place. Do anything to disrupt it, and you begin to collapse. You begin a collapse that starts a deadly chain reaction. If the density of this collapse reaches a certain weight, space-time itself begins to collapse. Atomic and hydrogen bombs physically tear into other dimensions. And whatever the experiment is that our government is involved with in outer space, if successful, it will change the density of matter to such an extent that the chain reaction started will not be able to be stopped by anybody in any world dimension. There are literally hundreds of different alien life forms here trying to stop what is happening, as it is putting their own worlds at risk. Some, as I had mentioned in earlier letters, are not supposed to be interfering, but they are doing so anyway. What they are all trying to do is stop the ripple effect that will emanate outward from Earth should this government experiment succeed. With all of their technology, why don't the aliens or their superiors just walk in and stop this whole thing themselves? Why do they need us abductees to speak for them? Something just does not make sense. I wonder if we are being lied to, used for some purpose to put over ideas that the aliens want us to believe. If there is an experiment, maybe if it succeeds, it will put us humans in competition with the aliens for something they don't want to share. Maybe they are trying to scare us out of their neighborhood. Close quote. The complexity of the chess game is so huge that now, after 40 years of trying to get to the bottom of animal mutilations and everywhere it has taken me all around this planet, as I read Linda Porter's words to you again tonight, or this morning now, it seems dark, that she really was hitting some nails on the head. And a big one is the layers of deception, not only by our governments, but by the non-human intelligences. And about the Ebens that are supposed to be friendly and allies, I received a Christmas card one year Christmas cards are used by people in intel agencies to communicate because of the volume of mail, and the government is not opening up everybody's Christmas cards. And written in that Christmas card, which I still kept, was, Linda, the Ebens are supposed to be our allies, ... But they lie. And you can also argue that we take our pets to the vet, and the vet is there to help the cats or the dogs, but they don't understand. They're panicked and afraid, and they hate going to the vet. And we are the superior life form at that moment because we're the ones who know why we took them to this strange place to have them handled and have needles put in them and extractions. And I always try to give that to audiences about this because the truth is, I've talked to so many people in the government who say to me, Linda, we really don't understand the ultimate end game. The complexity of the layers are huge, and there is deception by everyone. But it is possible that the allies have been trying to help us in strange ways, even blocking intrusions of dimensions that we don't even know exist. Always remember that, no matter what happens. Now, a similar warning about a government experiment in space was described by another woman in the abduction syndrome named Judy Doherty. I met Judy in the spring of 1980 when I was producing the TV documentary A Strange Harvest about the worldwide animal mutilation phenomenon. Law enforcement told me as far back as September of 1979 that they knew, quote, the mutilation perpetrators are creatures from outer space because of the bloodless surgical excisions on both the surface of animals and the removal of internal organs such as hearts and trachea without any surgical excisions on the outside of the body. Always remember that. How would you take out a 7 by 9 by 12 or 11-inch heart from the chest of a cow, a steer, a bull, a calf, without having surgery? And there's none. But then when they do the necropsy and they open it up, an entire heart is missing. Doctors say it could only be molecular extraction, frequencies that would extract only the frequency of heart tissue and would go through skin, bone, cartilage, other organs, and only take out the molecules, the literal molecules of the heart. And now, I'm going to share with you some excerpts for where it all began for me 40 years ago, September 1979.
Most everyone in the western United States heard about cattle mutilations in 1975. And a couple of years later, in 1977, most people thought cattle mutilations had gone away. The number of newspaper articles declined, and ranchers, many of them, stopped reporting their dead and mutilated cows to law enforcement. But the cattle mutilations never did stop. And by the spring of 1979, United States Senator Harrison Schmitt of New Mexico was concerned enough to call for a conference in Albuquerque on April 20th to talk about cattle mutilations. And I began wondering again, what was going on? In the past few months, I've traveled through Wyoming, New Mexico, and Colorado exploring this mystery. I've talked with journalists, law enforcement people, ranchers, and scientists. They have shown me their photographs, their reports, and their files. In this program, you will hear the testimonies of many of these people who have been involved with this puzzling phenomenon over the past decade. Some of their statements might shock you, but they're all part of this amazing story that I call A Strange Harvest.
investigators I've been working with for 5 years dropped in the office, and we discussed what was new. And he said, well, the thing is now, I'll tell you. He says, and I'm inclined to agree with him, that who is doing this now is very possibly creatures not of this planet. Now that, you know, that shakes you up a little bit. Creatures not of this planet. You know, you're thinking of Buck Rogers and things like this. But that's the way it is seriously right now. That it's very, very possible that these mutilations are being done by creatures from outer space.
You can feel yourself even going deeper in...
What you are about to hear is perhaps the first and only known eyewitness account of a mutilation. Because Dr. Leo Sprinkle is recognized as one of the world's leading authorities on cases involving UFOs and human abduction, he was contacted by the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization in Tucson, Arizona, to do hypnosis work with this woman. Her name is Judy Doherty. On a clear moonlit night in May 1973, Judy was driving back from a bingo game in Houston, Texas. She and her mother, daughter Cindy, and brother and sister-in-law watched a strange, bright light hover in the sky. After that night, she suffered terrible headaches and anxiety. In 1978, she underwent one hypnosis session which brought out part of her unusual experience, but not all of it. She also had several psychiatric and personality evaluations, all with results in the normal human behavior range. This second hypnosis session with Dr. Sprinkle occurred on March 13th, 1980.
Now you're standing outside your car. Now you're looking up. You can describe your impressions. What are your impressions?
It's like a spotlight that's shining down on the back of my car. And it's like it has substance to it. I can see an animal being taken up in this. I can see it squirming and trying to get free. And it's like it's being sucked up. It's taken into some sort of chamber. It's a little round, tiny room. And I get nauseated at watching how they excise parts. It's done very quickly, but the calf doesn't die immediately. For some reason, the calf's heart isn't taken, and I don't know. It seems like it's still living, and that upset me very much. And then I can see the calf being lowered. It's like it's being dropped back down. And when it's on the ground, it's dead. I can see that it's not moving. But I feel very sick to my stomach at what I witnessed.
You see the animal being cut up?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. How is it being cut up?
Dissected.
Mm-hmm. With knives?
Instruments of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe the instruments?
They're like a knife, but they have different kind of handles. More like a razor that's doesn't have movable parts, but like a straight razor type. There's tissue. It's laid out flat and smooth. It glistens. And the needles, there's needles in it, or what appears to be like needles. It may be probes, I don't know. But it has a tube connected to it. And the same thing with what appears to be testicles. Can't tell. There's a probe or a needle or something inserted. And the tube leading. The same with the eye.
Is anybody else around you?
I feel the presence of other things, but I don't know what they are. I can't see them.
Mm-hmm. You feel you're standing by the side of the road, by your car now, or are you standing someplace else now?
I feel in two places at once.
Mm-hmm. Okay, describe how you feel.
I feel like that I was able to see what was going on in the craft, but I was also standing beside the road.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just let yourself focus on what is happening inside the craft. Be aware of who is around you. It's okay. You'll be able to describe who is standing around you.
It appears to be two little men.
Two little men? Mm-hmm. How do they look?
They look... Their hands look funny. They have long claw nails, like... Okay, they have very large eyes. They're very hypnotic. Like, they're so big that... And they don't blink. Their eyes do not blink. It's almost like, I guess, a snake. They were very snappy about their movements, and they knew exactly what they were doing, and I felt a little better because for some reason, they projected that it was necessary this be done, that, you know, it was for our betterment, for the betterment of mankind that this was done, that they were more or less watching out for us.
So you felt better when you had that
Yes.
impression of not only precision, but also a benevolent or a kind attitude
Right.
toward people? Mm-hmm.
I can't say that they were kind.
But concerned?
I can't even
No,
say
you
that they
said
were
concerned.
concerned. They were just like doing a job that evidently it affects them too. And it has to do with somehow nuclear waste or testing, or they've been here for quite some time, and they test the soil as well as our water, as well as our animal life, our vegetation. When I question why they aren't saying more, and why they can't stop it if they're so knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
And they get angry. I don't know. I don't understand that.
Mm-hmm. You don't know why they get angry?
I don't know why they get angry, and I don't know why, if they can't stop it, if they're so knowledgeable.
At one point in the hypnosis session, Judy doesn't understand why she can see her daughter Cindy in the car 1 minute and gone the next.
Breathing deeply and easily, let yourself relax. You can be aware of yourself standing by the side of the car. You can be aware of yourself standing in the craft. And now let yourself be aware of where Cindy is.
I know I have a feeling of fear.
Okay, let yourself go on through the experience. Let yourself go on through the fear. What impressions come to mind?
I just visualize her on a table.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what happens next?
I'm afraid that it's going to happen to her, what they did to the animal.
Yeah. Just let yourself relax. Mm-hmm.
Forget it. No, I don't want to.
You can tolerate it. You know it.
No, I can't.
You know it's all right. Just let yourself go on through. Just relax deeply. You know that everything's going to be okay. You see Cindy on the table. What happens next?
I'm just afraid that they're going to hurt her.
Yeah, you're afraid, but you let yourself go ahead and let yourself go on through the experience. You can be aware. Just let yourself relax deeply. You can be aware of what happens next.
They put her to sleep, I guess.
Okay. You put her to sleep. Okay, what's happening now?
They're just examining her, I guess. But I'm so afraid that they're going to cut her or something.
Okay. Do you say anything?
They don't listen. They just ignore me and just go about their work like it's nothing. They don't seem to have any emotions. They don't seem to care. I thought they were going to harm her. I thought they were going to do to her what they did to the animals, you know.
But they don't harm her?
No.
No. Okay, well, what does happen?
They just take some samples from her.
What kind of samples?
I don't know, just scrapings, like they go inside her mouth. I can see her laying there, and they just kind of scrape little pieces off.
Yeah. Any other samples?
That's all I can remember.
The preceding scenes were taken from a 4-hour hypnosis session. Dr. Sprinkle stated afterward that Judy Doherty is, in his professional opinion, a sincere, honest, and credible person. What happened before our camera was her first complete and vivid recall of her 1973 experience in Texas.
They wouldn't listen. They just went about their work, yeah. They didn't have any emotion or feeling. They couldn't seem to understand why I would even be upset.
Just like it was routine business for them.
Like a laboratory animal or something.
If extraterrestrials are the ones mutilating animals, what do you think the implications are then for this planet?
Throughout the mutilations, all of us involved have been concerned with the possibility of the mutilations going from animals to human beings, understandably. Thank God to this point it hasn't happened. Whatever they're doing with the portions of these animals they are taking, I haven't the slightest idea. There's a reason for it. It's not haphazard. There's a pattern to it. I don't know. I think it's a wait-and-see game. What else can we do? If we do have beings from outer space doing this, with the capabilities to do things like this, what can we as a human race do? If they have the knowledge and the technology that it looks like they have, we're powerless. So maybe it's a wait-and-see game. I can't see anything else to do.
The first time that someone tried to put the baffling puzzle pieces of what I call an alien taxonomy together for me about who would all these creatures from outer space be, who would be the top dog, what would be the relationship between them, why were there so many colors and types, why did some seem to be insects, why did some seem to be these grays, why were some tall and short blondes with blue or gold eyes. How many ranchers had even seen standing up alligators and lizards on their own ranch when they were having mutilations, and they would describe looking at something that looked like a standing up reptilian. Well, the puzzle pieces on the alien taxonomy started being put together for me for the first time by a Washington, D.C. military source going back to the 83 to 85 time period. And he agreed to talk with me off the record about the gray type that he knew as extraterrestrial biological entities that he called EBINs, an acronym that has been used by our government going back to at least the 50s. My source told me that this drawing was, quote, almost like a photograph of an EBIN. He stressed that the EBINs have pear-shaped heads, not triangular with pointed chins like some other smaller types, like the one on the cover of the Whitley Strieber book, Communion. That would be a type of gray that has the very pointed chin. The EBINs are supposed to have this pear, like if you put the big part of the pear up and then you brought it down, the chins have a circle to them, whereas the Whitley Strieber type, it's pointed. He said the Ebens are from a desert planet, as far as he knew, that was orbiting the binary sun Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2, about 39 light years from Earth. The Eben planet skies are described as bright to dim, but never dark. This pastel drawing was done by a Colorado male abductee who was lifted up with his wife in their car by a cerulean blue beam of bright light, and he specified cerulean because he was a graphic artist. It's kind of a blue-green beam. And this was in November of 1985, just before Thanksgiving. And this was from a highway in Longmont, Colorado. The whole car went up in the cerulean blue beam. Both of them told me, totally conscious, and the panic of both of them yelling at each other as they are watching the car rise in trees and everything, until at some point they apparently became unconscious in the car before it was put down. And this entire case, with all the drawings, the hypnosis transcripts, are in my first book, An Alien Harvest. My Washington, D.C. military source told me the Ebens are supposed to be friendly and that they're not supposed to abduct people. But he had to admit to me, if this illustration by the husband was almost like a photograph of an Eben, then it meant the Ebens did abduct this husband and wife. It was a dramatic lifting of these people in a car, and it's very clear that the government of the United States has thought that it could make agreements with non-humans right from the beginning, but these non-humans have always had agendas of their own, and they have continued to carry them out. Now, my Washington source knew about my home box office TV project that took me to Kirtland Air Force Base on April 9th, 1983. I feel like I have been followed for 40 years, and the government knows more about me than my family. And it was at Kirtland where I was shown an alleged briefing paper for an unnamed US president that said, quote, "These extraterrestrial biological entities known by the acronym EBENS manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien," close quote. My Washington, D.C. military source, separate from this Kirtland visit, said that was true. He stressed that no one in the American government with access to that knowledge ever wanted to be alive if or when such an announcement were broadcast to the world that humans are someone else's experimental androids and ET human hybrid project. He told me that he had talked firsthand with a U.S. Air Force captain who received telepathic communication from one non-human at a crash site in the Roswell region 2 years after the July 47. This is another crash site that nobody had heard about publicly, and it was in 1949. The captain, more than anyone else at that crash site, could clearly receive mind-to-mind communication from the non-human, an alive Eben that they found at the site. And in fact, in talking with this government source who had seen 16-millimeter film that our government took in 1949, having the captain who was sent to Los Alamos, he was assigned, from here on, you are telepathically communicating with this being, so you are going to stay and live with this being, and every day we are going to film you, and you tell us, we will ask questions, and you translate for this being. And this military source said that in the film that he saw, that the captain was describing that as he was walking with the team, the retrieval team, and it was a crash, and they could see dead bodies, that all of a sudden, it felt, he said, like a pressure on both sides of his head that was making him look in a specific direction. And when he tried to turn his head, he couldn't. It was just, he was being drawn. And all he was seeing was debris. And then coming into his mind, he said, I felt pain, I felt agony, I began hearing a very strange, high-pitched screaming sound. He said it was unbearable, and I began to have the impression that this is from something that is alive in this debris that I cannot see. And they're walking, and he said, something happened in my mind, in my eyes, and it made me look. And inside of a hole where debris was all collapsed, he said he could see something shine. And he said, I went right for it. I lifted up a piece of debris, and there was the live alien. So the intensity and detail of what can come into the human mind from these beings is really, truly extraordinary. But it has only been throughout the history of all of this that only a few people can get it clearly. And that is why our government began in the 1950s going to schools all over the United States, if you've heard about this, looking for translators. They wanted to find children who they could test, who would know nothing. And out of the children that they tested in schools all over the United States, they were looking for somebody that would demonstrate for them that they could get image and telepathic thought. And I've interviewed some of those people, and we'll never know of the people who were taken from schools to help the government do telepathy. That Air Force captain said one of the most important telepathic transmissions while he lived with an Eben that looked like this at Los Alamos, where he was assigned. And they did these interviews every day on 16mm film. He said the most important telepathic transmission he ever received from this Eba was, quote, "We made you. We put you here on Earth, but you have to live it," close quote. My Washington source tried to explain what he thought the Eben meant when he told me the key to everything is ET creation of human ET hybrid body containers in which ET life force or souls can be placed to perpetuate one of the alien civilizations that is facing physical extinction because it can no longer reproduce. This explains why the light tube resurrection technology overseen by the praying mantis and the Eben in the California abduction case stressed the need to keep the soul of a human in a human body container for specific lengths of time. But it does not explain why Homo sapiens sapien must be used to make the vital hybrid body containers to perpetuate alien souls. This is my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness. It was first released in 1998. Not long after the publication, one night in Philadelphia where I was living, the phone rang late at night, and I was thinking it must be a family emergency because most people don't call late at night. But there was a deep, male, unidentified voice on the other end who just simply started talking without any hello, yes, I am. He just said, quote, "I thought you should know that your new book has stirred up a hornet's nest at MJ12 in Washington. Congratulations," click. Yeah, I felt that way too. Since the early 1980s, after the TV broadcasts of my documentary special, A Strange Harvest, I have received some insights from 2 different government agency men willing to hear my questions about the alien presence on Earth and why that alien presence seemed so focused on genetic harvests from humans and animals. One man was retired in Washington, D.C., the other continued assignments in the Southwest. Both said they had done work for the highly secret MJ-12 group. And they both emphasized that there was a difference between the gray-skinned Eben types with the pear-shaped heads and the smaller, thinner grays with triangular faces. The men thought that the Ebens were our allies, even though they will lie to us, but they did not trust the smaller grays. Adding to the physical appearance confusion were biological androids made by the Ebens and other aliens that ranged widely in appearance, from insects to humanoids designed by their makers for various planetary tasks in this and other solar systems. Both men have periodically given me information over the years, which I have no way to prove, but offer now in the context of other military and intelligence voices. And to honor their request for anonymity, I combined their information into one voice that I call Sherman in Glimpses Volume 2, High Strangeness, beginning on page 128. Sherman said it was true that MJ-12, or Majestic 12, was established by one of President Harry S. Truman's executive orders in 1947 that is still classified top secret to this day. MJ-12's charter, he said, was to study the UFO phenomenon, to oversee retrievals of crashed disks in alien bodies, to back-engineer extraterrestrial technology, and to study captured beings referred to as extraterrestrial biological entities. MJ-12, he said, was also directed to keep the public and the media ignorant of the extraterrestrial presence at all costs, and that means termination, which means murder of a lot of people over the last 70 years. Ignorant of the extraterrestrial presence at all costs, to prevent public panic, and to keep the aliens' advanced technologies hidden from Cold War enemies in the interests of national security. And every time I see that phrase anymore in documents and things that I study, at all costs. And the argument is that the government was protecting us, but they murdered people working for the government to keep it quiet. They murdered scientists to keep it silent. Sherman said in the 1990s, MJ-12 had changed to a different letter number code that began E2. I asked Sherman if he had personally seen non-human technology. He said he had held an Eben device called the Yellow Book, in which symbols glow yellow. It would be the iPad, is probably, and I'm not kidding, back-engineered ET technology of what I'm describing to you right now. Was Jobs at Apple an ET? And I'm not kidding about that either. And if he were an ET hybrid who facilitated the sudden advancement in that technology to get the iPhone and the iPad and the digital world really jump-started, and he did so, when you look back, it all happened in about 15 years. And I think that the iPad is a reconstitution for commercial distribution that was the Yellow Book. The Yellow Book had symbols that glowed yellow, and three-dimensional images would rise up from it. This hasn't happened yet, but it's probably coming. That it could be a flat book, But if you knew how to handle it with, like the alien showed this man, and he had done this, you could open the book to in indexes to different histories on our world, on another planet, and it would come up in a hologram, like in Star Wars, when Leia would come up in a hologram and you'd have noise. He said it had heat, it had sensation in it, and was about this size that would come up, showing their world and our world. Sherman said those three-dimensional images in the Yellow Book come from the Eben's ability to, quote, capture time and play it back, close quote. As if the Ebens monitor and analyze the consequences of their genetic manipulations on Earth over time for whatever big agenda that they have. Sherman said that he had been told that the Ebens experimented genetically in Bhutan, Tibet, and Nepal, and then transplanted some of those altered human ET hybrids to what we call Central America. Specifically, the Mayans, he said, were an Eben genetic experiment, and that the genetic material had been extracted from humans in Bhutan in the Himalayas. I ask, then Sherman, is it true that the Ebens and maybe other extraterrestrial groups manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien, as I was shown in the briefing paper at Kirtland Air Force Base on April 9th, 1983? And Sherman said, yes, Linda, but it is a difficult subject. They've been here since at least the time of the dinosaurs. Very consistent with the DIA guy in December 1999 who said that they had proof that three competing, conflicting extraterrestrial groups have been on this planet terraforming and harvesting genetic material since for at least 270 million years, which takes them before the time of the dinosaurs. And according to a report I read, said Sherman, the Ebens collected one of each species of dinosaur and placed them either on one big planetary zoo or on different planets. And that was at least 68 million or more years ago. And I guess they have experimented with life forms here ever since. There is an abductee in Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, military, who talks about being abducted and taken to a planet, and that were by the gray Ebens, and they were very clearly trying to show him that they have a planet, a whole planet, that has all of the dinosaurs that ever lived on Earth, that they took these species and made a dinosaur planet that has been operating and is supposed to be out there since the asteroid took out 95% of life 66 million years ago. I asked, what about the animal mutilations? He said, the animal mutilations did occur and were performed by the aliens. We allowed them to conduct experiments using animals and not just cattle. I don't know if you are aware or not, but there were a lot of moose and caribou found mysteriously dead in the Arctic and Alaska, and it includes reindeer. There's every wild animal you can think of and every domestic animal you think of have been mutilated. We think it was part of the Eben experimentation, but we could not figure out what happened. The Ebens wanted to conduct experiments, and we figured better animals than humans. To complicate matters, in order to cover up the animal mutilations, our government launched a military program to test certain biological drugs on animals, and this was to cover up the alien mutilation program. So whenever you hear about any kind of tranquilizer or some drug, and clearly humans were doing this, you just stand up and tell them, no, that was counterintelligence. We've got to get smarter. We have to see through government counterintelligence, and I hope I am helping people do that. Do the Ebens themselves enter pastures and cut the tissues from animals in mutilations? Well, after we had more communications with the Ebens, they explained to us, you have to understand that for an advanced civilization, you have robots and androids to do those things. And we began to understand that the Eben androids could be anything. The androids can be configured any way the Ebens want. The Ebens are controlling a big part of an operation concerning Earth, and we cannot control everything they do. But I can tell you the Ebens are big environmentalists, huge. They would make the Sierra Club look like Brownie Scouts. They were so worried about our nuclear tests and nuclear materials being exploded and contaminating not only the Earth, but the universe in general. Sherman, do you mean that our atomic bombs impacted other life forms or even other dimensions? Right. So that's one of the things the Ebens were very vocal about. They wanted above-ground atomic tests stopped, and boy, were they stopped. From your point of view, are Ebens the only non-humans that have experimented genetically on this planet? Sherman, all I know is that the Ebens started an experiment, but they could not keep out other space travelers. Word got out that this planet was a strange place to visit, and that different experiments were not going the way the Ebens wanted. Part of the Ebens' problems might be because there are bad guys doing experiments here too that might harm us. That really confuses matters when it comes to telling who wants to help humans and who does not. In abduction reports, people describe creatures that look like praying mantis insects. What are those? Well, as far as I've heard, they could be very advanced androids which can oversee long-term projects that last for thousands of years, but I'm not certain who they work for. And in fact, not only abductees, but other government sources since this discussion have told me that the government now knows that the praying mantis types can be, it's hard to comprehend, that if their assignment was to oversee the beginning of a solar system coming out of the birth of a sun, the praying mantises will be assigned to cover and report, analyze, manipulate for the entire length of that solar system. And I said, do you mean that the praying mantis could be 10 billion years old at the end of our solar system's life? And this man said, that's what we understand, that they are an android species hybrid that is made to monitor, report, manipulate, and oversee some solar systems from the beginning to the end. And that gives you a sense that the deeper you get into this, the bigger and more incomprehensible the agendas seem to be, and the idea that anything could be made to sustain consciousness and life for 10 billion years. What is the relationship between the Greys and the Ebens? Well, they were enemies at one time. They are supposed to live without war today, but the Ebens have no control over the Greys. The Greys do their thing, and the Ebens do theirs. Is there a pecking order among the alien types? To the best of my knowledge, no cooperation exists between the different alien groups. And I think there was a war about 6,000 years ago between the Ebens and the Blondes over territorial rights to a planet somewhere. I don't know if it was out at Zeta Reticuli or around here or what. So both groups, the Ebens and the blonde humanoids, make android creatures to do work for them on different planets. That's what I understand. Androids come in many different types: insects, reptilians, grays, humanoid, blondes, men in black, and others. All have an advanced implanted brain that can operate on its own or by remote control. Ironically, we think some of these genetically engineered creatures have a higher intelligence than their creators. The Ebens and the blonde humanoids know how to mix and match genomes in DNA easily. They can make robots or androids that can be anything they want them to be. Remember, the aliens are millions of years advanced beyond us. That was the first time I'd ever heard anybody with knowledge tell me. It may not be all, but certainly some are millions of years beyond us. Sherman said the Ebens even make blonde-looking containers that the Ebens control, and the blondes make Eben-looking container bodies that the blondes control, adding to the confusion of the layers of the chess games. You cannot tell the players unless you have technology that is advanced and alien to aim at any body in, like in this room. There might be a hybrid, there might be a full-bore ET camouflaged in a human body, and then Homo sapien, and I'm not kidding. And the Ebens genetic experimentation in Tibet, does that connect somehow to the Dalai Lama? I'm thinking about reincarnation through different beings in different cycles of life. Would that concept relate to an Eben supposedly telling an Air Force captain in 1949 that recycling of souls is the machinery of the universe? Sherman said, exactly. There are only so many souls that just continuously recycle. Through life form bodies that are containers? Right. And if there are more container bodies than souls, what happens? Sherman, I don't know. But souls are interconnected in some way. I think they told us that because the Ebens have been around so long, they have learned that there are only so many souls in this universe, which must be recycled. If there is a finite number of souls in the universe, and the Ebens know that, and yet we are living on a planet in which there is an exponential increase in the number of bodies, does that imply that not all bodies can have souls? And Sherman said, I guess you have a point there. And if not all body containers have souls, would the Ebens and blonde humanoids have some stake invested in souls? Like souls could be the coin of the realm, so to speak? Sherman, well, that's possible, I guess. I never thought of it that way. Some abductee researchers, such as Dr. Leo Sprinkle, a Wyoming psychologist and Harvard University psychiatrist, Dr. John Mack, now deceased, God rest him, stumbled onto what appears to be a continuity of the same Ebens, or maybe other gray types, present from human life to human life, because the same alien being comes up in past life regressions at birth and at death. And I've heard many of those hypnosis sessions. They are very puzzling. Sherman says, I don't know. All I do know is that the soul, when the body container dies, the soul contains or maintains or keeps thoughts or something from that life that was just lived. It is said in the Yellow Book that the Ebens are concerned about human souls. If our particular species continues on its course, they are afraid we would damage our container bodies and that could damage the souls. Well, how would our body containers damage souls? I don't know. I realize the containers are the human bodies, and that was why they were so concerned with what we have been doing, the wars and so forth. They are afraid that the souls will be damaged by our containers. One of the MJ-12 guys who had seen more of the Yellow Book talked to me about an analogy. He said that when you put something in a container and you pour it out, there's always some residue that remains. Think of a paint can. something remains in that soul. So when you pass the soul on in different containers, it picks up the residues of all the different containers it has been in, and a little of each remains and stays throughout. I guess there is an eternity. There's no end. I ask him, this is Sherman talking about, I ask him, does the soul wear out after so many recycles? And he said, no, the souls never wear out. The Supreme Being makes sure that doesn't happen. While reviewing these pages of Glimpses of Other Realities, a research colleague and attorney, Michael Pill in Massachusetts, wrote to me, quote, Linda, the notion of the soul picking up residues may explain why we have memories of past lives. It may also explain why, after spending thousands of years and who knows how many wretched lifetimes trying to work out the karma from one or more evil incarnations, one can still feel the enticing charms of the dark side. Those 7 deadly sins are like predators. They've got you before you realize they are there, close quote. I asked Sherman, is there a devil out there somewhere? And Sherman answered, there is an evil force. Even the Ebens talk about it. There is a supreme being, and then there is the evil one, the evil entity. The Ebens are as scared of that evil entity as we are of the devil. I ask, well, where is the devil? Sherman said, I don't know, but what worries me is that if the Ebens are scared of a devil, I'm damn scared of him. Because the Ebens can control everything. They have been around this universe and they have done everything. And if they believe in the same supreme being that we call God, and they say there is an evil one, then there really is a devil. I ask, would the devil be equal to an opposite of the positive God? Are there 2 gods in opposition? Sherman answered, I don't know. You can think about that forever. There's another thing that puzzles me. The Ebens say that everything that occurs in our time span has occurred before. I guess it means we're just right in the middle of a huge big circle, and it just goes around and around again. And the way I see this is that the earth was created, and one day, 5 billion years from now, the sun is going to expand, and earth will be engulfed and destroyed, and everything goes back into a big bang, and everything starts over again. I ask, when the Yellow Book talked about the Supreme Being that created the universe, did it say anything about parallel dimensions, parallel timelines, or anything else like that? Sherman said, no, nothing. The aliens talked about the vastness of the universe, that there are life forms all over. It talks about a supreme being creating the souls and creating the containers and distributing the souls to the containers. And to the Ebens, these are just facts. I ask, if the Ebens made us and put us here, there has to be a reason. Are we a garden growing containers for souls to be harvested for some reason? Sherman answered, well, it's another good question. All I can tell you is that one elderly man with MJ12 told me, quote, you do not want to know when I ask him about souls and why the Ebens made us. Sherman, some abductees also say that the main reason for the animal mutilations and human abductions has to do with the creation of a hybrid species. But no one knows whether the hybrids are supposed to replace the current Homo sapien container model. There is a sense that whatever the non-humans are up to, it has something to do with survival, theirs and ours. Sherman said, maybe. All I know is that the Ebens are supposed to have manipulated DNA in primates long before humans were created. So there must have been a series of experiments like Neanderthal before Cro-Magnon. And Neanderthal's gone, so who knows what is on the agenda for human Homo sapien. Centuries of genetic manipulation by other intelligences was reinforced for me in 1999 by the retired Defense Intelligence Agency analyst. He said his job had been to monitor, quote, the geopolitical territorial conflicts of 3 competing extraterrestrial factions or species. Those alien presences have based themselves underground in various parts of Earth, and at least one type has been terraforming Earth and genetically manipulating Earth life for at least 270 million years. They made the dinosaurs, he said. And what he suspected is they either allowed or provoked the large meteorite to hit the Gulf of Mexico 66 million years ago that erased their dinosaur experiment. And next came the rise of mammals that led to primates and to us. The DIA analyst was especially interested in the resurrection technology described by abductees Linda Porter and the others in my 3rd book, Glimpses of Other Realities, High Strangeness. He knew about the cloning technology from his DIA work and described how concerned he and his superiors were about human body containers camouflaging the conflicts of an alien presence through the often chaotic evolution of Homo sapien. Who are we really? Does someone else own or battle to keep ownership of Earth, of us? Are humans unwitting pawns in a multiple-level chess game? If so, is there an alien ally, really a Prometheus or Enki, trying to help us advance more rapidly in order to better survive, as Sergeant CJ said? Is there truly some kind of alien threat from beyond the alien presence underground onto Earth and our solar system? Like, what happens if an Osiris or Zeus or Jehovah return? Our planet is now in the middle of its 6th mass extinction of plants and animals because of humanity's spread around the planet, destroying and paving over so much ground that once sustained abundant Earth life. We are currently experiencing the worst period of die-off since the loss of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. Scientists estimate that we are now losing animals, plants, and insects at 1,000 to 2,000 times the rate prior to the 20th century, with dozens of species going extinct every day. That means by the end of this 21st century, as many are now estimating 30 to 50% of all Earth species could be gone. Perhaps the non-human intelligences which watch this planet can see humanity's own future hanging in a balance, but will not allow humans to destroy the Earth planet. Perhaps that is why the aliens increased their interference at nuclear missile sites and human abductions, despite aggressive government efforts to keep everything about the alien presence a big secret. One fact is certain: no matter who made humans or why, life on Earth is not guaranteed. But if the chokehold on the truth were released and the entire human family could know everything the governments and the militaries are hiding about an alien presence on this planet that still manipulates DNA and harvests Earth life, perhaps human tribal warfare would slow down in the alien concocted Garden of Eden, where a reptile was the teacher. In November of 1984, I was a speaker at the University of Nebraska with astronomer and CUFOS founder J. Allen Hynek. PhD. I presented about animal mutilations, and Dr. Hynek talked about UFOs. Afterward, he said to me, "Linda, let's let our hair down with each other." And I thought, wow, I am going to learn what Hynek really knows about UFOs and ETs. And we went to a quiet room away from the conference buzz. And to my surprise, Dr. Hynek began with, "Linda, the most important book I have ever read and hope that you will read too is Theosophy by Rudolf Steiner." In that book, first written in 1922, Steiner summed up his understanding about the relationship between the human mind, body, its soul, and animating life force spirit. Quote, "In the soul, the eye flashes forth. It receives the impulses from the spirit and thereby becomes the bearer of the spiritual human being. Humans are rooted in the physical world through their physical body, ether body, and soul body that come to flower in the spiritual world. The stock, however, that takes root in the physical body and flowers in the spirit is the soul itself." Neither Hynek nor I knew that he would pass into another dimension only a year and a half later from a brain tumor. And I would not learn from abductees about the ET soul transfer technology for 7 more years in 1991, when abductee Linda Porter illustrated seeing the human soul life force radiating gold-orange light as it moved from the dying man's body into another body cloned by a praying mantis and gray Eben-type non-humans. But one realization has become very real for me. There is a secret war on Earth. One group of other intelligences wants to see humans evolve into oneness with the divine field responsible for all matter worlds. Another intelligence wants to stunt human evolution, eradicate us. And to do so, it harvests us genetically for its own self-serving purposes. Thus, the confusion of contradictory literature and conflicting religions throughout human history. Religious inspirations have been used to homogenize various human groups and our thinking to make them more controllable by the competing intelligences. But those have often been ET inspirations for manipulations, not honest guidance from the divine field. Maybe like political factions, the dark party and the light party are competing over legislation to legalize the production of cloned android life outside the force of creation's recycling program of a finite number of souls. Maybe some souls are captured and put into clone bodies, which is fouling up the divine field's process. Other clones might never receive souls. Hybrids may be without souls. That political issue about cloning for galactic trade or alien wars might explain why dramas of resurrected saviors from Osiris in Egypt to Christ in ancient Palestine, Israel today, have been presented repeatedly to humanity. Osiris and Christ were beings with human bodies and mysterious divinity, who emphasized that death in the body does not end life for the soul and spirit. That concept underlies the Egyptian obsession with mummies and sacred rites to protect the soul at the moment of death from competing forces. If there is a finite number of souls, as the government whistleblowers I call Sherman says, are under a strictly regulated God force recycling program, then cloned bodies and androids might end up outside, excluded from that recycling process. The full scope of the complex, multi-layered chess game for souls, spirits, and bodies of humans, extraterrestrials, angels, and time travelers might be beyond human ability to understand. One scientist in New England, who has also been abducted by gray beings who repaired his diseased heart, told me that he was shown holograms that depicted a series of universes in pairs, mirrored images, each the opposite of the other from the subatomic to the macro. He says, quote, "Our universe is paired to another universe, which is completely opposite of this one. There, the skies are glowing white with dark suns, colors are indescribable and iridescent, time flows to the past, and like a conveyor belt at the moment of death in our universe, we move through a tunnel into the mirror universe where it is all light. There, time moves to the past, and souls return back here into this universe," close quote. Perhaps the unique isolation that each human feels and the peculiar melancholy a dark sky filled with stars can evoke have something to do with knowledge buried in our genes and our souls, a sensing of ancient intimacies with other beings and other worlds. And now, in this time of revolution, when the whole world will know we are not alone in this universe, our greatest challenge as a species will be to stand up unafraid before the old gods and watchers. Ultimately, there is a common bond among all life forms, ebbing and flowing on spirals of different frequencies supported by a singular force, an invisible matrix of energy from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. Thank you.